Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today I want to talk about one of my favorite pieces of structure to fish during the springtime. It holds up year round, but it really is very good during the springtime. And specifically what I'm talking about are rock transitions. Rock transitions, in my opinion, are often misunderstood because a lot of people don't understand what that means. Specifically, all it means is you're going from one bottom type to a different bottom type. It's the transition from one type of bottom to another. It doesn't necessarily have to be big rock. It could be gravel to sand. It could be gravel to mud. It could be bluff rock to smaller, large size rock still. The key here is it's that transition zone. When you move from one type of bottom contour or bottom type to another type of bottom type, what you get there is an intersection that the fish like to use as a feeding area. A lot of times if you go from, say, big chunk rock to gravel, what you get there is a good transition zone that crayfish like to use. You also get a bottom change that bait fish like to use. So it's almost like the highway, right? Because if you have a very defined change, that creates an opportunity for the fish to feed. So they use them. I mean, I can't specifically sit here and say all the reasons why the fish use them, but we all know at this point from experience that rock transitions really hold up well. A lot of times those transitions during the springtime create really good spawning grounds as well, and that's one reason they like to use them. So I've got several examples here that I want to go over with you. Before I do get into those, I do want to remind you that if you're looking to support the channel and you need to buy some tackle, head over to Tackle Warehouse and use the link that I provide in the description to take you there. Sales will be attributed back to the channel here and we'll get a small percentage. It's a good way to support the channel. Guys, rock transitions are a great thing to fish during the spring. So I've got here several examples, and there are so many different examples. I could sit here for an hour, hours showing you different pictures, but I've got here 4 different types of rock transitions, and some of them are more unusual in that it's not often think of as a transition, but it very much is so. And some of these are ones that go overlooked. So the first one that I have here is just a classic rock to sand or gravel transition. On the one side of the picture, you can see you've got much larger rock, and that has a very defined stop that then transfers into a sand. It looks almost more like a mud bottom, so it's a pretty good change in bottom contour. I think most people identify a rock transition as something along these lines. It's very much a rock transition. This is a spot that I know of on an Ozark lake that always produces for me, and it's a very simple, classic rock transition. The second picture here is a transition that I don't think a lot of people would necessarily call a rock transition, but it 100% is. You're going from a very steep bluff to a more of a 45-degree rock flat. It's still similar type of rock. It's still big, flat ledge rock, but you're going from a bluff to more of a 45-degree angle, which creates kind of like a bluff end. And this is a very good place to fish during the pre-spawn period. If you have lakes with smallmouth or spotted bass, they can also be very good spawning areas. But again, this is another type of rock transition. The rock type didn't change a whole lot, but the change in depth at which that rock is at did change. The third one, if you fish up in the North Country, guys, this is absolutely dynamite if you have smallmouth around. In this case, it's a sand flat that has a very defined rock patches in that sand flat. So you can see, this rock patch right in the center of the screen, and it's got a very, very simple sand flat all the way around it. Smallmouth will get on those rock edges and swim around the rock edge. They love to be on a sand to rock transition, and this is a very classic spot. A spot like this would hold up year round, but in the springtime can be absolutely excellent. These types of spots, though, also hold up for largemouth and spotted bass. So if you have, a good rock hump or a rock transition on a sand flat, that could be out in 3 feet, could be out in 20 feet. It also holds up really well for largemouth. A lot of times, if you have a little bit of scattered weed around on that same flat, that's where it really plays for largemouth. The last example I have here is one that I think would often go overlooked, but it very much is a rock transition. So if you were to look at this when this bank, when the water was higher, you would see a consistent rock bank. The thing is, what most people don't recognize is there's normally a rock transition that occurs from the rock to a sand or a mud bottom as you get deeper. So in this case, the rock transition is probably, I'm going to guess, in about 10 or 12 feet of water as you go further deeper, further out. So it's not necessarily a rock transition that changes on the bank, because in this case, this rock bank continues for probably a half mile. This is just a section within that half mile, but the rock transition is actually as you get deeper away from the bank. This happens on most lakes, where you get lakes that kind of start silting in, and you have a rock transition as you get deeper. So just because you see rock on the bank doesn't mean that it carries out 200 yards off the bank. In this case, the rock transition is probably 20 feet off of the bank in about 10 feet of water. So that, in my opinion, means what you should be doing is fishing not necessarily the bank, but fishing 20 feet off of the bank where that rock transition is. It's an often overlooked rock transition. So those are 4 very different examples of rock transitions. Most rock transitions you can find pretty easily by looking just at a contour map. Anywhere you see a change in contour lines, those are very good places to find rock transitions. If you see a hump or a high spot, a lot of times that's a hard bottom. But you're really just looking around for any sort of bottom composition change. And a lot of times you can visually see it as well as you're driving down the lake. If you've got channel swing banks or you've got points, there's usually going to be some sort of bottom composition change along those that you can visually see. If not, if you have the ability to use side imaging, you can see that very easily using side imaging. But it is a very good high percentage place to fish. It's something you want to pay attention to. I think a lot of times people look for a big rock flat and they get right up on top of the rock flat. Your best area is probably not right on top of the rock flat. It's on the edges of the rock flat where you're transitioned to sand or gravel or whatever other bottom change is around. And that's where you should probably be fishing. You may catch a fish or two up on top of the rock flat, but you'll probably double or triple your catches by fishing the transition zone. And from a bait perspective, it really just comes into play as to what you're fishing. For the most part, if you're fishing a rock transition that occurs on the bank, your crankbaits, your jerk baits, your finesse jigs, those types of baits will work really well for that change. They're all relatively weedless. They all can get down to the bottom that you're looking to fish, and they just catch a lot of fish, especially during the springtime. The last thing, though, that I do want to note is it's not just about rock transitions. The main takeaway from this video, guys, is that you want to find transitions. So a transition could be a weed line. So if you went from no weeds to weeds, there's a transition there. You could be fishing along a standing timber row. So if you have a big patch of standing timber on one side of the boat and no standing timber on the other side, you have a transition there into standing timber. The fish like to use transition zones. It does not just have to be a rock transition. It can be a transition from, rock to timber. It can be a transition from weed to rock. It's the transition. Those are your high percentage spots. That's where you want to be fishing. So next time you head out to the water, find the transition zones. That's what you want to concentrate on. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, share it on social media, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned, another tip coming out tomorrow.